All right, good morning. Good morning again, the second time here. And if you want to open your notebook to lesson number 23. Lesson number 23. As I jumped into this lesson last week, I didn't think there'd be any way in the world that I would struggle finishing getting through the 6 books that I had to. The week before, I was, quite mindful of that, and then, time was gone. So we need to go back and finish the Minor Prophets. This kind of becomes Minor Prophets lesson number 3. Here today, and finishing up lesson 23 and perhaps a little bit of 24 as we have time there. So that gives us one more opportunity to go over the books of the Old Testament, all right? And so let's say those together. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. All right, very good. And so today we are going to finish up these last 3 here of the Minor Prophets, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. All right, we've talked about some of the dates for them, and you have this insert back around Chronicles or Ezra in that time frame. And we are keeping in mind that these Minor Prophets do fit into the different historical records that we kind of find back before the book of Psalms and those different historical books. And we are looking at today, if you notice on the screen, the right-hand column, these are going to be the post-exilic prophets, big fancy word that means after the exile, after the captivity, after the Jewish people begin to return. And so that's the time frame that you're looking at there, all right? We looked at Nahum. He was the destruction of Nineveh, and we're reminded that God is a God of justice, and He does bring justice, and that gives our hearts great comfort at times. Habakkuk, why do the wicked prosper? He asks questions of God, and you have questions sometimes, doubts, uncertainties. You can take those to God. Go right to God with your questions, your doubts, your uncertainties, and talk to God about those. And then Zephaniah, God's approaching judgment. God is near. He's right here. And so they needed to get serious about their walk with God because of God's approaching judgment, His nearness in that way. All right, so those were the 3. Wow. Hello. Something stuck there. Let me go back. Giving you all the answers. That's just not fair. All right. Yeah. All right. So we're going to look at Haggai here, or Haggai, depending on how you want to pronounce it. If you want to open there in your Bibles, find that little minor prophet. And first discussion question I want you to ask is, why do people struggle to get involved in God's work? You can think about this even from today's point of view, not just the Old Testament, but in the church age here, modern America at church, Christians. We're especially thinking of God's people here, Christians today, people who would call themselves to be believers. Why do they struggle to get involved in God's work? Because Haggai is going to deal with that here. So take a few moments at your table and discuss that question, and then we'll look at it from this book. All right, go ahead. All right, let's jump into this and talk about this for a few moments. The date that I have for this is 520, and the children of Israel go into captivity 586 BC. They're there until about 538, and Cyrus the Persian takes over and frees them to go back. And a whole wave of the children of Israel go back, and they begin to rebuild their temple. And they lay the foundation, and then all the work stops on that, and it just sits there for 16 years or something like that, and nothing is accomplished on it. Nothing is happening here. And God sends along 2 prophets to get them to get busy about building for God again. And one of the themes that's brought out in this book, as your notes make note of there on the bottom of page 100, is this word consider. One of the key words that he uses is this idea that they need to stop and consider. Look at chapter 1, verse 5. Now therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. It's used in verse number 7 as well. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Chapter 2 and verse number 15. And now I pray you, consider from this day and upward. It's used again in verse number 18 twice. Consider now from this day and upward, from the 24th day of the 9th month, even from the day that the foundation of the Lord's temple was laid, consider it. They need to stop and they need to think about some things. And sometimes in our Christian life, even in my own devotions this morning, I was just thinking about the fact that there are different Christian concepts that we have, ideas that we know about, but we don't think about them. You know, we know the facts, but we're not meditating on them. They're not changing our lives. They're not making an impact. And sometimes life is just so busy, so crazy, we're not thinking. We're just going through the motions. We're just doing the very next thing. And he challenges them to stop and really consider several different things in this little book. And I love little books like this, 2 chapters. Again, you feel like you can get your brain wrapped around them, right? And just study them and dive in deep. As we go back to chapter number 1 and verse number 4, chapter 1 and verse number 4, is it time for you, O ye, to dwell in your sealed houses, and this house lie waste? They came back. They rebuilt their own houses, so they had a place to live. They had their nice paneled walls and all their beautiful homes that they had constructed and put together, and God's house was a slab of concrete at this point in time. All they had was the foundation. And God says, you're doing everything to make your own life comfortable and have your own house, but how come you haven't built my house? So many times we're so busy building our own lives that we don't make the time to build for eternity, to build for the cause of Christ. And it's a very, very sobering challenge here. He makes in this book, though it's 2 chapters, he really makes 4 points, I believe. And each one of these 4 points is time-stamped. As you study the Bible, sometimes key words are repeated, like the word consider, and that gets your attention. Sometimes there are other elements that God directs the writers to use that draw your attention as well. And these are time-stamped. If you look at chapter 1, verse number 1, in the 2nd year of Darius the king, in the 6th month, in the 1st day of the month, came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet unto Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, the son of Josedek, the high priest. So it's Darius' 2nd year, it's the 6th month, and it's the 1st day of the month. All right? It wouldn't be June 1st, but to us, you would think it would be June 1st, just as far as our 6th month in that way, all right? When you go to the end of the chapter, go to verse number 15, you see that some time has transpired, verse 15, in the 24th day of the 6th month. So 24 days have passed in chapter number 1. That helps you. You see God at work over a period of time. The second message is time-stamped in chapter 2, verse 1, in the 7th month, in the 21st day of the month. All right, so we see now another month has passed since the end of chapter number 1, and that time stamp gives us an indication of his second main point. He's going to give us a timestamp in verse 10. In the 24th day of the 9th month in the 2nd year of Darius. And that's his third timestamp, his third message. And then we come down to verse number 20. And again, the word of the Lord came unto Haggai in the 24th day of the month, saying. So I believe these 4 different timestamps, the first one having kind of a start and conclusion to it in chapter number 1, give us the 4 main points that he wants to get across here. And here's how I would describe somewhat of the theme. When we talk about getting involved, serving God with all your heart, being all in for God, these are the different points that he makes. In chapter 1, he talks about priorities. I could hear a lot of you talking about, life is busy. I heard that from a couple different tables. Why don't we build for God? Why don't we get involved? We're busy. Isn't that a similar way of saying it's just maybe not the priority? Other things become priorities in our lives. And in chapter 1, he deals with that issue. When he asks, hey, you've built your house. Your house is all fancy and your house is all nice, but you don't have time for my house. And it's probably pretty similar to today. Everybody today wants a house that looks like it came out of a Menards catalog. This past year's Menards catalog, it's got to have the latest siding style and it's got to have the latest colors. And if they're not the latest colors, then you repaint every so many years, And, you got to have the right style of cabinets and the right kind of countertops and all of that stuff. And Americans can be very busy with their landscaping and their house and all of that and not make time for God's house. So he deals with priorities. Chapter 2, verse number 1, he deals with perceptions. I'm a pastor, so these are all going to begin with a P, all right? We perceive different things. Verse number 3. Who is left among, go to chapter 2, verse 3. Who is left among you that saw this house in her first glory, and how do you see it now? Is it not in your eyes, in comparison of it, as nothing? There were some of them that had been kids when the Babylonians came in and conquered them, and they knew what the previous temple looked like, Solomon's temple. They saw it in all of its glory. Then they went through the captivity, and now being ancient in days, they come back home and they're trying to rebuild this temple, and they're struggling to just survive. They don't have the gold. They don't have the resources to rebuild it to the same epic proportions that Solomon had. And their perceptions, how they see it, is very, very discouraging. And sometimes we don't build for God because of our perceptions. There are different things that we see that discourage us. And he deals with that in that second timestamp there, in that second message. Then we go to chapter 2 and verse number 16. This is in the third timestamp there. And verse number 16 says, since those days were, when one came to an heap of 20 measures, there were but 10. When one came to the press vat for to draw out 50 vessels out of the press, there were but 20. I smote you with blasting and with mildew and with hail and all the labors of your hands, yet ye turned not to me, saith the Lord. And look at the end of verse number 19. From this day will I bless you. Long story short, the third one is personal profit. What am I going to get out of this? That's part of the discussion here. And God says, I'm going to bless you. You haven't experienced a lot of blessing up to this time because you didn't do what's right. But I'm going to bring blessing. And like it or not, this is a motivation in people's life. This is something that we struggle with, especially when we're busy serving God and somebody else isn't. What am I going to get out of this? That I helped and they didn't. And God talks about profit. He knows that. God promises rewards in the New Testament. And so this is a biblical concept. And then chapter number 2 and verse number 23 in this third timestamp section. In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, will I take thee, O Zerubbabel, my servant, the son of Shealtiel, saith the Lord, And I will make thee as a signet, for I have chosen thee, saith the Lord of hosts. And he's talking to Zerubbabel, the governmental leader of the Israelites, and he's saying, I have something special for you to do. You have a part. And that is an important aspect of getting people involved in building God's work and being all in for God as well. Understanding that God made them to have a part. God has something special for you to do. As a Christian, you have a spiritual gift and you need to use it. And so Haggai gives them these challenges to help them to get all in serving the Lord. And really, these 4 points, I think, are points that Christians today need to be reminded of as well, who are not serving the Lord with their lives, who are not going after the Lord with their lives. He makes an interesting application here, right there in the middle of page 101. The condition of God's house reveals our values and priorities, and he applies it to the church building. You know, this is a great reminder. How do we take care of God's building here? We understand this is simply a location where God's people meet. As you drive in, do you ever notice the condition of the building? Whether weeds need to be pulled, the lawn needs to be mowed. As you walk into the building, do you ever notice if a wall needs to be scrubbed? If something needs to be cleaned up or repaired? If we have work days, are you able to come and help to take care of God's property here? You ever stop by on your own and do something on your own to help take care of this place? God has blessed us with 3 acres and 4 buildings, counting a parsonage, and we're very, very thankful for it. It gives us incredible resources that many other churches our size do not have. But it is our church building. And it is our responsibility to keep it tidy. And so if you can help in those different ways, I want to encourage you to be observative and notice the things, the needs that it has, and do what you can to help keep it looking tidy and in good shape there. So that's his application, and I'll pass it on to you as well, all right? So Haggai's got a pretty great message there about being all in for God. So you need to fill this in on page 97A, I think it is. The theme, consider your ways. And is this a time for you to dwell in your sealed or paneled houses and God's house lie waste? Then we're ready for Zechariah. Get that filled in there. All right, discussion question that I want you to chat about at your table here briefly is, what are some Bible answers to help people in hard times? Whatever the hard time is, what would be some Bible encouragements that you could give to people? All right, take a minute or two at your table and talk about that. All right. Let's talk about this for a moment. Zechariah is a contemporary of Haggai, and they work together a little bit on this project of getting the people going in this building. It's a tough time. It's a discouraging time. And Zechariah is similar to Daniel in speaking much about the future. And he is giving them great encouragements for the hard times and the difficulties that they face. He's going to tell them much about the coming Messiah, and seeing the coming Messiah is meant to give them encouragement in the difficult times that they go through. We can find that Zechariah is a contemporary of Haggai in two ways. Number one, if you're there at Zechariah chapter 1, verse number 7, we can see a timestamp again here. Upon the 24th day of the 11th month, which is the month Sebat, in the second year of Darius. So we can see that this is the same as Haggai was. That was the second year of Darius as well. And then Ezra chapter 5 and verse number 1 mentions them together as working together, as well as Ezra chapter 6 and verse number 14. Those two places in the Bible talk about the work that these two prophets did together. And so we can have hope in the hard times and in the difficult times of our lives. And he gives several ways that you can have hope. And I'll give you a couple answers. These are my notes. If they're helpful to you, you can scribble them in the margin, as were the last set of notes that I gave to you on all the P's from Haggai, all right? The first thing, if you want hope in hard times, repentance is the answer. Turning to God. Chapter 1, verse number 4, "Be not as your fathers, unto whom the former prophets have cried, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, turn ye now from your evil ways." That idea of turning, repenting. You got to turn to God in the hard times of life. Repent of what you're doing wrong and turn to Him in faith and trust. And he talks about it in the opening verses. And then he gives them a series of several different visions. You can see this brought out in chapter 1 and verse number 8. "I saw by night, and behold, a man riding upon a red horse." He gives them several different visions here. And as you look at these different visions in the first 6 chapters, these visions as a whole tell us God is at work. Sometimes we struggle through the hardships of life because we don't feel like we see God at work. We don't see God work in our lives. We don't see God at work in our world. We don't see God at work in some loved one. We don't see it. And no, we can't always see it because we're human. We're finite. We're limited. But God is at work, and God gives them vision after vision after vision after vision to help them to see that God is at work through this. Chapters 7 and 8 then, he deals with traditions. And this is really a great section there. They have this tradition of fasting in chapter number 7. These guys come and talk to Zechariah and ask some questions of him. Chapter 7, verse number 5. "Speak unto all the people of the land and to the priests, saying, When ye fasted and mourned in the 5th and 7th month, even those 70 years, did ye at all fast unto me, even to me?" God had a specific time of year that they had to fast. With the fall of Jerusalem, they added some days of fasting, really days of memorial and weeping over the fall of their nation. And God says, you've done that for 70 years. But was it just a ritual, or did you really do it for me? And it's really a great section there to evaluate some man-made traditions. We can add some traditions into our lives to help us remember certain spiritual things. But when we have some of these traditions, are we really doing them for God? Or is it just an empty ritual? And he talks about that in those verses. Then chapters 9 through 11, which we're going to talk about more in just a moment, he wants them to see Christ's first coming. And there are several prophecies of Christ's first coming. And then he gives prophecies of Christ's second coming in chapters 12, 13, and 14. We're coming down to the end of the Old Testament. And the very first thing in the New Testament is Christ is coming. If you're discouraged in the hard times and the difficulties of life, get your eyes on the fact that Jesus Christ is coming again. He could come today to take us to be with Him. He'll be returning to set up His kingdom at the end of the tribulation and rule and reign with a rod of iron here. And you get your eyes on His kingdom, and it makes a great difference in your heart and life. And so then we have these several blanks to fill in. And so let's walk through these. Chapter number 9 and verse number 9. Prophecy, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is just and having salvation, lowly, and riding upon an ass, and upon a colt, the foal of an ass. And so here is this prophecy. He's going to enter Jerusalem riding upon a donkey, and a great prophecy that is brought out there in chapter 9, verse number 9. Chapter 11. All right, you're going to have a lot of writing here to do, so go ahead and write, and I'll read some of these verses. Chapter 11 and verse number 12. And I said unto the Lord, if ye think good, give me my price, and if not, forbear. So they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver. Of course, we understand in the New Testament, Jesus is betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. All right, Zechariah prophesied that. The New Testament writers noted that. Zechariah chapter 12 and verse number 10. Chapter 12 and verse number 10, another prophecy. And I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplications, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourneth for his only son, and shall be in bitterness for him as one that is in bitterness for his firstborn. Here, the promise is that the Jewish people will someday look upon their Messiah and they'll finally believe He's the Messiah. And what detail do we notice about the Messiah? The fact is that He's been pierced when He was crucified on the cross. It's an awesome prophecy. And it's an amazing thing to think about at His return at the end of the tribulation, when the Jewish people will finally realize Jesus was their Messiah all along, and they missed it. Chapter 13 and verse number 6 is interesting here. And one shall say unto him, what are these wounds in thine hands? Then he shall answer, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. Wounded by his own people. I might take a little bit personally different view on verse number 6 than what he's taking here on this. But certainly Jesus was wounded by his own people. He came into his own, and his own received him not. Verse number 7, awake, O sword, against my shepherd, and against the man that is my fellow, saith the Lord of hosts, smite the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered, and I will turn mine hand upon the little ones. And so, hopefully you got those two written down. If we smite the shepherd Jesus, then his disciples will scatter. And we see that they did that in those New Testament references there. And then chapter 14, verses 3 through 8. Let's pick it up in verse 4. And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof toward the east and toward the west. And there shall be a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall remove toward the north, and half of it toward the south, and ye shall flee to the valley of the mountains. And what an awesome prophecy this is that he makes. He shall return again to the Mount of Olives and establish his kingdom there. Pretty amazing thing. And so Zechariah gives us a lot of prophecies of Christ's first coming and of his second coming. And to people in hard times and difficult times, we've got to get our eyes on the coming King. You got to see him, the coming King. Still seeing a lot of writing, so I'll give you a chance to get all that put down there on your paper. Then we're going to go to Malachi, the Italian prophet. Malachi, all right. Malachi is next. My date for Malachi is 433. It's been about 100 years since Haggai and Zechariah were on the scene. And they had some enthusiasm, and that kind of diminished. And there's some struggles now 100 years later. Malachi's name means my messenger. My messenger. And that's significant because there are 55 verses in Malachi, 47 of those verses are directly from the mouth of God. He is God's messenger. He is directly relating God's message there. It's interesting because Malachi's book is written in a way that probably all of us as human beings can understand. It's written in the form of an argument. Not that any of us ever argue, right? God says something, da-da-da-da-da, and they say, oh yeah, well what about? And they argue it. There's this debate and discussion all the way through. It seems like God knows people pretty well, and so He writes in that format here. And my title for this is Sins of the Supposedly Spiritual. Oh, I didn't give you the Zechariah thing to fill in either, did I? All right. Go back, get that. My PowerPoint's behind. 97, the coming Messiah, King and salvation. Those are your 4 blanks, 3 blanks to fill in there. Trying to advance my PowerPoint and realize I'm behind. The thing with Malachi is talking to people who are, they are following God, at least on the outside. The captivity, as awful as it was, did solve the problem that the Jewish people had. And the problem that they had is they kept going after idols. And the captivity largely cured them of that. Now they're going to go after God. But the problem is that they go after God sometimes in a really empty, religious, ritual sort of way here. There's nothing on the inside. They go after God on the outside. And so it's the sins of the supposedly spiritual. It's not written to the lost. It's written to us as believers here. When we really just are going through the motions of our Christian life and therefore we're treating God in a light way. The Bible uses the concept, you're despising me, which means you're treating me lightly, not a person of value in that way. And they were failing to do something to God, for God. Go to chapter number 3, verses 8 and 9. Chapter 3, verses 8 and 9. One of the ways that they showed they didn't really value God, verse 8, will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But ye say, now see, there's the argument. Right? Wherein have we robbed thee? God says, you're robbing me. Oh God, where? How are we robbing you? In tithes and offerings. All right? And He challenges us, and there's your blank for you. They were not giving the tithes and offerings to God. He challenges them in that way to give of their tithe, of their 10% unto God, which I believe is a timeless principle of our giving, that we ought to be giving to God 10%, a tithe of what we have. We see Abraham giving a tithe even before the law was enacted. And in the New Testament, that we are to be giving to God in proportion, still a percentage, still bringing out that concept of a tithe, a percentage in that way. And so Malachi challenges them here to truly be spiritual here. They were serving God, but out of routine. And what is so interesting about this is the last book of the Old Testament, and it ends with all these people that are supposedly serving God, but not from the heart. And when we basically turn the page and we get to the first book of the New Testament, there's a whole group of people that are really passionate about serving God, but not from the heart. And who are they called? What's the name of them? The Pharisees, right? They were doing it really, really publicly so that everybody could see, but not really serving God. And so it sets the stage for what we're going to find in the New Testament. Let me give you the blanks to fill in. Renewal, tithes, prove, and blessing. All right, there's some truth for you on the last 3 books of the Old Testament. All right. Okay, next week we'll pick up, and there's a fun little quiz there. Maybe we'll do that next time and review it. All right, review the answers, and then we'll jump into the New Testament, Lord willing, next Sunday morning. All right? Thanks for coming. You're dismissed.